Hello, everybody. We are back once again. New video. Today we're looking at SoFi. Now, SoFi focuses mainly in the lending area of financial services. So they kind of do I think they do student loans. They do many different types of loans. They also do a little bit of just like financial investment services, as far as I know. But their stock price has been on a explosion recently, right alongside Robinhood, right alongside some of those other like fintech financial services companies that have been blowing up over the past couple months. So let's get into everything with SoFi. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't. Comment any companies that you want reviewed down below. I will make sure to get to them as soon as I can. And that's about it. Let's get into SoFi. All right, so getting into SoFi, mostly loan focused. Obviously, they do other things in financial services, but one thing I really want to point out is consistent number of subscriber growth here. This is an estimate, I believe, just for the year, and these two numbers are essentially the same thing. Efficiency ratio, not exactly sure what that is, but it looks like they're fairly consistent with it. Total products, again, don't know exactly what that defines, but you could see the fairly consistent growth there as well. You could see their stock price growth right here also, similar to companies like Robinhood, where they have just seen a massive comeback recently after kind of having sort of slowed stock price growth over the past few years. But overall, let's get into it. Cost of capital looks all right at just over 10%. Target price is at $10, which this is way above at 15. Long-term growth rate is not shown. However, I'm sure it's similar to Robinhood's, where long-term growth rate is very good. So anyway, looking at the financials, let's go to their income statement and see what we see here. So if I can just zoom out ever so slightly. So overall sales growth looks really good. Clearly accelerating over the past 2 years, going from 1 billion to almost just under 4 in 3 years is pretty solid. Operating income looks solid. One thing I will say is that it looks like it's supposed to take a dip in 2024, but again, this is also not finalized results, although usually it doesn't change too much. Net income. So one thing with this is obviously net income is positive, operating income decreased. They most likely did that in order to gain profitability. So that is something to consider there. So while operating, I'm going to do the 0.5 on, only because it's going to be decreasing again. Net income, this is a fairly rare case for me where net income is going positive while operating is not also doing the same thing. But continuing, EPS looks really good following the net income there. Total shares looks like they have diluted very significantly. Now, I say that because 25% in 4 years is crazy. 25% of 800, right around 200, adding those 200 shares in the past 4 years. That is not good, actually very bad. Now, one thing to note, obviously, just became profitable. Hopefully, they continue down that path. But again, that kind of dilution is not something you want to see long term, and hopefully, they slow that down fairly soon. Now, because SoFi is sort of like a bank, obviously, their balance sheet is a little bit different than the usual. Usually, I actually just avoid banking companies only because I don't know how to even read their balance sheets for the most part. But because they are obviously very different. But overall, everything looks good. Cash is solid. Um, Assets are growing massively. Short-term debt is non-existent because this is a bank. So I'm just going to give them the credit there. Overall debt, you actually kind of want it to be somewhat decent because, again, it's a bank and banks make money with debt. So a little bit of different stuff here. And then we can check out the retained earnings. You can see it should be coming up in the next year or so. They obviously don't have the 2024 results here yet, but they should soon, and that should start going back up. But for now, they do not. So I'm just going to do the 0.5 because that is not finalized information yet. But expecting it to continue upwards in 2024. Let's skip down to the cash flows. Again, this information all over here, if you can see it, is banking stuff. A lot of it is just extra stuff for banking, which I am not very good with. I don't really know how to read it that much. Banks are very different than regular companies, so I'm going to do my best here. So overall, operating cash flow you can see is doing pretty well. Looks like they're fully funding it with just funds from operations, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see. Investing, looks like they're purchasing a ton of investments, which looks good. And then financing cash flow, you can see other funds. This is actually mostly based on how many extra shares they're having. This is mostly extra shares. I think it's just classified as other because of whatever reasons, but not great there. But yeah, they are selling off a ton of shares, so that's just showing up there because obviously the change in capital stock here doesn't really show it as obviously as you would think. So that it has to be coming from here in the other funds, but not too sure, but we'll see that in the use of cash probably as well. And then just for their free cash flow, it looks okay. I don't want to take off the full credit here, but obviously it did slow down in the past year. But again, they gained that profitability. So it seems like they just kind of took some sacrifices to get that profitability, which could be okay, could have some negative consequences, but just have to see in the future. In terms of their use of cash, we can see decent amount of debt issuance, but also a lot of repayment. I'm honestly, once again, probably going to do the well, they're only really issuing more in the 1 year here. Other than that, they've been paying off overall more, including interest. So I'm actually probably going to just give the full credit here because, again, banks work differently than debt. And then you can see here equity issuance, fairly significant. Although, again, it has slowed down in the past 2 years, which is strange only because on the balance sheet it showed there being way more total shares. Maybe we could see some explanation with the 2024 quarters. And actually, no, not really. And they actually repurchased some in the past year. So that is definitely something to look at. Hopefully, they'll continue in the future, but they should probably now that they're turning a profit. But yeah, overall, in the past 10 quarters or so, their equity issuance actually looks really good. This is most likely for employees and officers that they're issuing a little bit of equity. This is an actual stock repurchase right here, the 323 million. So overall actually looks good. I don't want to give the full credit only because their total shares have been increasing so much, but I will give the half credit there because of their consistency over the past 2 years. So finally, let's get into the ratios here, and then we will go into their earnings report and then onto their stock chart. So looks like SG to sales has been decreasing significantly over the past 2 years. That's always nice to see. It's not too high either, although 35% of income is still definitely significant. Net margin is at negative 10. I'm not going to give it the full credit only because it's negative, but again, they're bringing that up. And obviously, if we go to, actually, I can do the full credit because if we go to 2024 here, you'll see it go positive. So I think I will do the full credit there because they have succeeded in making that positive over the past quarter, which is awesome. That's one of the reasons their stock price is up so much. And then obviously the ROA, ROE are both positive along with it, which is good to see. Long-term debt to total equity is hovering just around 50 over the past 3 quarters, which is solid. Looks like they have been fairly significantly higher in the past. So that's a pretty good number for them. So overall for SoFi, I'm clocking them in at a 78. Fairly solid score based on the other companies I've done, but overall, just about a little above average. We could see here SoFi is in the upper half. I would say, yeah, definitely in the upper half. So overall, pretty good. Let's get into the earnings report recently and see what we can find. Obviously, turned a net profit in the past quarter, and it looks like they don't have anything available at the moment, or unless it's just not loading for me. But oh, here we go. Okay, so metrics recap right here should be solid, should be juicy. Oh, and they have a lot of information for us here, so let's just go through it. So net income, pretty significant beat. Looks like 50, almost 60, actually basically 60 million beat. Interest income beat. Loans are above. Other is fairly in line, a little under. Interest expenses beat. All of these basically beat as well. Other doesn't matter. In line, slightly under, significantly over. So I am not going to read through every single part of this because there's so much, but overall, everything beat essentially. Contribution to profit, you could see here. EPS is beating slightly from the estimates, which is good. Lending beat, financial services beat. Home loans looks like are up. Personal loans are up. Student loans are up, which is really big for them. High interest rates. And then total accounts at 160 versus, I'm assuming this is the estimate of 164. So a little bit under that actually. But based on how much more they've made in all the revenues, that doesn't matter too much. So overall looks pretty good. I'm going to see if there is another more information here that I could get for you guys. If you want to read through this area here, adjusted revenue up 39% from a year ago. That's pretty solid. Product highlights. If you want to read through this, you can just pause here. But other than that, that's all I'm going to go through. There is member and product growth if you want to read through that quickly, but pause there if you want to. But overall, everything for SoFi looks really, really good. Let's get off of that stock and go to SoFi so I could show you over the past few months. Now, I was actually tempted to trade this stock a while ago when I was doing more swing trading, and I was following a wedge downwards. And I guess around this point, I just forgot to check on the stock in a while, and they blasted out of the wedge and found some decent support and then took off. And boy, does it hurt that when I was making this video, I checked their stock chart and I saw the wedge I was following, and I couldn't believe I forgot about it. But so that is it for SoFi. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.